share something that I've done and some ideas for what you could be doing to build your community sites. A couple of words about myself. I'm Juhis. I'm a developer community builder. I run meetups. I do talks. I teach programming. I'm also a blogger, an indie webber, web developer, like probably a lot of you as well. And I'm joining today from Turku, Finland, so the Nordics in Europe. And it's already super dark, pitch black outside, as the evening and the winter is doing its number. And I've been a big Eleventy fan for the past 5.5, 6 years. So I started with the version 0.2 point something in 2018. I moved over from mostly doing Jekyll sites. And I've been a big fan of the community, big fan of the tool, and big fan of what you can do with it. And the number one thing that really excites me about all of this is that the way Eleventy is built with these building blocks, it feels like a different type of static site generator than a lot of the ones, at least the ones that came before it. So instead of just having one way to do something and only one thing that you can do, I really enjoy that I can do multiple different things. And I can do them with different tools. So I can kind of mix and match the things that I enjoy for different use cases. And everything that I'm talking about today, when I start going into the examples, you could do them in at least a couple of different ways. So it's not only that the global data files is the only way to do them. They just happen to be the one that I've chosen for these couple of specific sites. So this is the first of the websites. It's a home for a front-end developer community called Turkulat Frontend that I've been running since 2015. And it starts with this kind of header image, some text that you can put into an HTML or markdown file. And then we have a calendar, the list of sponsors, the theme. And these three are components that are powered by JSON. And there's a couple of others as well that I'll briefly talk about in a bit. But it's a very simple site for a community that organizes events and then occasionally does something else as well. And for these ones, I kind of accidentally ran into the global data files sometime, I would guess during the pandemic, when I was doing some rewriting of the website. And if we look at the documentation, the way global data files work is that you have a folder. You can define that in the configuration. For me, it's _data. And all the JSON files and JavaScript files that you put into that folder will be available globally to all the templates that you use. So you can keep all the data separate from the layout and the other website. And it's easy to find because it's always in the same place. And then if you have kind of like a bigger project, you could look into template-specific data files. I'm not gonna talk about them today, but it's an option that instead of having one folder and everything accessible globally, there is an option to put those files closer to where they're used and only accessible by specific templates. So let's take a look at one of the examples. So as you saw on the screenshot, we have this calendar. It's usually the next and then the data gets rendered onto the calendar. And you can do all sorts of dynamic and conditional things. So if something is missing, like the host, then we show a placeholder DPA. If there's no URL address yet, then we just show the text without the link. And we format the date so that it fits the Finnish way of putting dates. And we have a similar page for the history, the timeline of all the events that we've done, where we have the event, date, the host, and the talks that people have been giving. And this lives in a separate file. And then, because it's JSON and it's not typed in any way, we can just use any kind of special cases. So for example, I have two different types of events. The regular meetups that have a host and have talks. And then we have what I call special events, where we can just put any kind of random description. And that's something I like about Eleventy as well, is that I can make it as custom as I'm okay maintaining. Because making these objects kind of custom and not adhere to a schema makes it a lot of more flexible, but it makes it more difficult and more kind of a burden to maintain. But since 99% of the time I am both the developer and the content editor, as long as I'm kind of okay with myself making these special cases, then we can have a really nice and kind of flexible website. And then with the sponsors, it looks the same. We have a really simple JSON file with just the name and the address. And then we have a special folder inside assets where you put the logo of the company, slugified with PNG, and the templating and custom nunchuck filters will turn the name of the company into the image file path. And we did the same with the team and with our Hall of Fame of speakers. I'm not gonna go through them in detail because it's all the same. It's JSON that gets rendered in different kind of forms at different parts of the website. But what I really like is that when I make these as includes, I can put them anywhere on the site without having to think about stuff. I just include something that's in the includes folder, and everything else is taught up front. And for example, this one, when we originally made the site in 2016, it was a Jekyll site, and this partner grid was an HTML with a bootstrap grid. So whenever I added something to it, I had to shift everything else down, and that was a mess. So using global data files is one example of doing things. And since we're building these static sites from any kind of data source, another option that you could do is to use some kind of a content management system. And most of the stuff would be the same, like the rendering and the layouts. So I want to compare these two a little bit. And especially from the point of view of why did we choose to use the global data files. So if we look at the global data files, one of the really good benefits is that it's local. It lives with my repository. Anybody who clones the repository, they already have all the data. No configuration, no extra tooling. You don't need to share any kind of user accounts or permissions like that. The big downside is that writing JSON is not fun. I don't think anybody in the world actually enjoys modifying and writing JSON. And the second thing is that if you have a lot of data,
I think your audio dropped out, US.
Oh, sorry. Thanks. So let's jump back. So the downside of a content management system is that it needs extra hosting or some kind of extra tools if it's local, and you create a dependency to a third party, something that even if you run it, you're not controlling it at the same place as the website. And this was the big reason why so far I haven't put any kind of CMS next to these sites. Like I mentioned, 99% of the time it's just me making all the updates both for the content and the website. But if you are building this to a client, or if you're building this with a team, where the content editors are not engineers, I would highly recommend looking into this CMS side rather than making non-technical people edit JSON. One thing I want to highlight is that documentation is really crucial. Not just for global data files, but any kind of content management. So what I've done is I've added on the README. How do you add new stuff? And what kind of formats and what the content needs to be on these specific things. And there's two things that you should always document in your content management system, whatever kind of tooling you use. The first one is what the content should be. This could be the format of like the dates. It could be what does the host key mean in the event. And secondly, something that is usually missing is where it should be displayed and how. So for example, that I show the date, I store the date as an ISO date, year dash, month dash date, but then it's displayed in the Finnish date dot month dot format. So that helps the person to know that okay, I need to input it this way, and it will look like that. And I haven't done a really good job with the second one so far with our system. It's something that kind of I discovered while I was making this talk that I haven't done a great job with that yet. And the reason why that is so important is if you've ever written a blog post on somebody else's system or added some kind of content in a CMS, you may have seen this kind of checkbox that just says featured. And whenever I run into this, I think about like what does it mean? Where does it go? If I click it, do I mess things up? If I don't click it, do I mess things up? So it's really important to document what those things actually mean. Because the person creating the content might not have any idea how those things affect what's happening in your website. And sometimes that other person might be you in the future. So documentation is really important. And while I've said a couple of times that editing JSON is not fun, I do like the fact that with this global data file approach, I can make content edits directly in GitHub if I'm in a pinch. Last week I was sitting in a bus. I got confirmation for one of the hosts for this month's event. So I was able to open it on my mobile app. I was able to edit the JSON, commit that, and it would get automatically deployed to Netlify. So it's a nice thing to be able to do if you really need to. But editing JSON on a mobile phone, it's not the experience I would choose if better ones are available. And when we started a new community at the beginning of this year for Python developers, I basically just copied the folder, the repository from the other one. I cleared out all the JSON files and started from scratch. And the way these sites are built is that if you don't have anything in the events, it doesn't show the calendar. If you don't have any sponsors, it won't show empty. We don't have any sponsor section. So you can kind of build step by step, adding things
Yeah,
some
thank you
comments
guys.
on the chat and reading them through.
Yeah, happy to open it to questions if anyone's got anything.
And if nobody has any questions now but you want to ask later, I'm in the Discord, so you can ask questions in the Eleventy Meetup channel, or you can do that me in Mastodon. More than happy to answer any questions, but if there's nothing now, I think we can pass the buck to Rob.
Hand it on over.
All right, let's see if I know how computers work.